You might be wondering why I'm holding this mousetrap and how or even if it relates to our topic of evolution by natural selection. That's okay. It'll all make sense though by the end of this video. So we'll come back to this in a minute. In Darwin's Origin of Species, he wrote that if any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, his theory would crumble. This statement is exactly what American biochemist Michael Behe used to fuel his research for finding biological systems that meet this criterion. Behe has developed a concept called irreducible complexity, which describes biological systems that Darwin said would break down his theory. Behe defines irreducible complexity as a single system composed of several well-matched interacting parts that contribute to the basic function, wherein the removal of any one of the parts causes the system to effectively cease functioning. Let's take a look at my phone for a moment. It's pretty impressive. It's quite complex and there's many parts to it. In fact, many of these parts are unnecessary. We could take a lot of them off. For instance, we could take the camera off. We could take the flashlight off here at the top. We could even take the ringer switch off on the side, and this phone would still function as a phone. Now, let's take a look at this mousetrap. This is a system that Michael Behe would define as irreducibly complex, meaning that if we take away any one of the parts of this mousetrap, it would fail to function. To think of this from the aspect of evolution by natural selection, it is logically consistent to think that a lesser form of an irreducibly complex system would fail to function and therefore could not function to adapt into a better form. Our body is made up of such irreducibly complex systems, one of them being the bacterial flagellum. Without going into every single detail here, Behe explains the flagellum as the propeller that allows a cell to swim. Essentially, the flagellum consists of three subsystems: the base, which contains the motor, the hook, which acts as a universal joint, and the filament, which is the propeller. And within each of these subsystems, there are multiple precisely constructed and functioning parts. The base consists of the motor, which rotates the flagellum and is constructed of many different proteins that perform several specific functions. The hook that connects the base to the propeller is constructed of 120 copies of another type of protein, and that is lengthened to precision. Between the hook and the propeller is what they call the junction zone, which contains proteins that act as adapters to connect the hook to the propeller. And finally, the propeller is constructed with a complex protein that creates a highly efficient and functional swimming mechanism. There are even more intricacies with the proteins involved in making this system work. Behe's point with all of this is to show that all of these parts that make up the bacterial flagellum must be in place or else it does not work. The flagellum could not have evolved from a lesser state to become the functioning system it now is because it simply could not have functioned with lesser parts. Behe also shows how the blood clotting cascade is an irreducibly complex system. If our blood does not clot in the right place, in the right amount of time, and at the right time, we would bleed out. And certainly, no living creature that bleeds out can survive to reproduce with more beneficial characteristics. Irreducibly complex systems create a major issue for evolution by natural selection and evolution as the foundation of biology. John Lennox writes, "Reason has a far larger scope than science. Scientism is a dangerous belief that science is the only way to know truth, and it is pushing young adults away from the church. And it doesn't help that many popular figures are promoting such a view through very relevant topics such as evolution. However, The relationship between DNA and proteins through the process of self-replication and irreducibly complex systems have pointed to the fact that evolution may not be the only reasonable explanation of reality. And perhaps creationism isn't so unreasonable after all.